The only thing Jen is guilty of, Nicole?
A telemarketing scheme, defrauding the elderly, and a large collection of knockoff designer handbags.
Not so shamazing after all.
The Constitution says you're innocent until proven guilty. And period. End of story.
This is episode 9 of Disengaging.
Our show recapping our spiciest takes on season 3 of The Real Housewives of Salt Lake City. I'm Julia Ritchie in Nashville, Tennessee.
And I'm Nicole Nixon in Sacramento, California.
And we had to wait a day, Nicole, because we knew January 6th was coming. Not only the 2-year anniversary of our insurrection at our capital, but Jen Shah sentencing day, which a lot of Twitter users had a lot of fun with.
Yeah.
But yeah, let's just recap sort of where we're at. So all season Jen's been unraveling because she's awaiting sentencing. Sometime last year, she changed her plea to guilty, and we knew that she was going to serve jail time. And today we found out just how much.
6.5 years.
Yeah, which she could have faced up to 10 years. That's what the federal prosecutors had recommended, and her defense attorneys had argued for 3. So the judge kind of landed somewhere in the middle there.
I guess. I really thought she would get more. Jen owes her attorney some good... I hope her attorney is getting paid really well because, she knocked 3.5 years off that sentence, so...
It's true. She'll have 5 years of supervised release after she serves her time. We have some other details. She'll be reporting to prison on February 17th next month. And the judge revealed it'll be somewhere in Texas. I saw somewhere else on Twitter that Jen's attorneys had requested that she stay at the same prison in Texas where Elizabeth Holmes of Theranos fame will
goodness.
be. I know. What a collab that could be.
Fraudsters extraordinaire.
Yeah. All day there was really kind of phenomenal coverage of this sentencing, given how, I don't know, unimportant Jen Shah really is in the grand scheme of things. We don't even have a U.S. House Speaker right now as we're taping, But there was some really great coverage out of, NBC News had a live blog of it. There was this other guy. Yeah, and there was this other guy who was, I want to get Inner City Press is the Twitter handle. And Queens of Bravo also gave a shout out to them. And they live tweeted the whole sentencing hearing with basically verbatim transcripts. So I thought I would go through some of the...
This is citizen journalism at its finest. I am so here for this.
This part interests me, though. She goes, "How will you raise the $6 million in restitution?" And Jen Shah replies, "My manager is here. We're working on things." And Judge Stein replies, "While in prison?" And Jen Shah replies, "Yes." And then the judge is worried that she's maybe profiteering off of this whole case and using it to further bolster her celebrity. And she goes, "I sold merchandise about this case through a third-party vendor. I will devote it to," because she had, remember the free Jen Shah?
Yeah, she had merchandise and people were feeling pretty icky about that.
They were free Jen Shah kind of merchandise. And she says, "I will devote it to the victims. Thank you for reviewing my sensitive information."
So she defrauded all these people, and she says she's going to raise the money for them by selling us merchandise and through a third party, and then she's going to donate all of that money to her victims. In what world does this make sense? Make it make sense.
Well, so I'm going to read you what Jen said to the judge today, which is that, "Thank you, for reviewing my case. Long-standing untreated mental illness caused me to create my own fractured reality. This is a crucible moment for me. With the proper medication, I can now see what happened. I wish I could have stood outside myself. I am sorry. I have found solace in my volunteer work with anti-racism organizations and the LGBT community." And then she goes on to address her husband or her son directly. And, it's sad. You can't say anything other. She's it's the whole meme, this is me reaping, this is me sowing. But one thing I told you that you needed to hold me accountable is I did enjoy Jen on the show, and I don't think I ever really stopped to think about like what she was accused of this season, if I have to be really honest. Because I think Utah is sort of synonymous with scams. We talked about Whitney's husband being involved with LifeVantage, which is an MLM, and MLMs are notorious for taking advantage of people, promising them wealth and all these things. And so I didn't know that the extent to which Jen had taken it was quite extreme when I started like reading victim statements today.
Yeah, those were really hard to read.
Yeah.
Really sad.
Yeah, there was this one, an Atlanta teacher who hoped to start a health and beauty business during the pandemic when teaching jobs dried up. She said when she clicked on an online ad to help her work from home, she was inundated with calls from all kinds of companies, including this one that is associated with Jen Shah. And she said, I, was told I needed to send $1,000 from my bank for a social media boost package. In January 2021, I started having a lot of problems with the website. I was trying to reach the marketing, the coaching, the website builders, and I just couldn't reach anybody. There was no website, nothing. Her head was spinning. Oh, this is just a scam. She contacted all of her credit card companies. She put in $18,000, Nicole.
No.
Yeah. A 67-year-old teacher in Atlanta. I did get back some on my credit cards, about $8,000, but the rest is gone. And this is a person who's not even part of the case. This was a person who was part of the... Yeah. Like she's not actually maybe one of the restitution victims, but still one of the people that was taken by this overall scheme that Jen Shah was helping run.
Yeah. There were a lot of those really, there were a lot of those victim impact statements that were really hard to read. And, there were people, similar situation, like retirees maybe, or people like in their 50s, who talked about putting like, a few tens of thousands from their retirement into it, or, putting down like this person, it sounds like one of the victims talked about putting down initially like 1,000, but then their card was getting charged for way more than that. And just not at all what they signed up for. Suddenly going like into credit card debt over these things and just getting really getting stuck. Meanwhile, Jen's raking in the money, spending it on glam and a Shaw squad and counterfeit and real, brand
and lying to her quote unquote fans or apologists, even like me, all season. Like, give her the benefit of the doubt. I never really gave her the benefit of the doubt, but I didn't know the extent to which she had defrauded so many people. And that leads me to sort of my first question is like, are we like ethically compromised by being entertained by someone like Jen who has committed crimes? Or
I have a few thoughts on this. Okay. First of all, yes, I think our society holds a bit of blame for holding up people like Jen and overlooking maybe, as Heather puts it, as we'll hear later, like suspicious parts of them and their lives and how they make their money and not asking harder questions. Overlooking that in favor of like being entertained by them. Not only overlooking that, but overlooking the fact that they can get, really violent when she's drunk, throw glasses at people, pull hair, just be very over the top aggressive with people who are supposed to be her friends and loved ones, right? So There's one.
No, I think you're right, though, is that we are encouraged by not only like the editing of the show, but just it's a suspension of disbelief, right?
Yeah.
We often talk about Jen as a character and other cast members as like literally being cast on the show. And that is actually what Jen herself and her attorneys argued, that so much of the show is edited to make her look bad. I don't necessarily even disagree with that.
And that she's playing a character on a show that's very different from her real life person. And she's not the only reality star to make this argument recently. If you've seen Selling Sunset, Christine Quinn also, is known as the villain on that show. And she went on the Call Me Daddy podcast a few months ago and said, listen, I'm the villain and like I act this way, but I'm playing a character. I'm a character on a TV show at the end of the day. That's what people want, and that's what gets people tuning in, is me acting this way and being this way because it's entertaining, and that's what Netflix wants. And I think that not even just Jen, I think probably every housewife in this franchise plays that up to some extent.
Mm-hmm. And I think where I almost believe Jen is that she did believe her own hype. She did believe she was kind of this untouchable when she was cast on the show. And so I'm going to read you what the federal prosecutors said at the trial today. Jen Shah was laughing in text messages, asking, did you get her to stop crying about an 80-year-old woman? She told people how to do it. It was a brazen fraud. She operated her own floor. She moved things overseas.
Wow.
The idea that it was a witness statements that impacted her and not our evidence is hard to believe. She says she's turned a new leaf. We're not so confident. She mocked the victims. In her plea agreement, she admitted to being a leader of the conspiracy. Unlike others, Jen Shah lived a life of luxury. She didn't even need the money. Today, I saw on one of the articles, they published Coach Shah's salary, which I think we had discussed in like one of our early episodes. Mm-hmm. He makes $630,000.
Wow.
Which is not, maybe Real Housewives level rich, but that's fucking rich. You
know
what I mean? Like that's comfortable in Utah.
Oh,
and
totally.
The fact that that wasn't good enough, right? Like, you can clearly support a family of 4 on that.
Yeah.
And
maybe not at the ski chalet, but like a really nice house and a really nice lifestyle.
Yeah. Well, so the attorneys for the federal prosecution said her husband made a good living. Like, that's understating it. Like,
yeah.
I don't think football coaches should make that much money, to be quite honest with you. So I guess all of that today sort of started piquing my guilt.
We've talked about Jen as a character. I think she has had quite the arc. This is a TV show for our entertainment. That doesn't mean that people aren't without their own nuances, but she did really horrible things and she is going to pay for them. And she also, like, if you're feeling any more guilt, she defrauded a ton of people and she, got away with it for so long, for 10 years. Like, how would you know? You shouldn't feel guilty about that.
For fake handbags.
The only one who should feel guilty are Jen Shah and the people who worked for her and knew what they were doing, and possibly people like Heather who had an inkling but were too scared and cowardly to drill down and ask some hard questions of Jen and of themselves.
My answer to it is that if she is proven guilty, then I will probably have to sit across an awkward conversation, but I'm willing to go have a conjugal visit.
It's not a conjugal visit. You're just going to visit her.
Not a conjugal visit unless you're going to hook up with her.
Yeah, so you're just going to visit her.
This is a great segue, Nicole, to how the other women have both treated the allegations against Jen at this point before her sentencing, and basically like what we see in this episode.
This was such an interesting episode to play before the sentencing. I don't know if they edited it this way, knowing it would air like 2 days before her sentencing. The anticipation I was left feeling after this episode was like unreal.
It's unflattering to everyone.
Oh yeah.
I think about when Angie K is like, well, I've been asked several times, like, what am I going to do if she comes out like that she's done all this stuff, and she basically is like, I don't know what I'm going to do. And then Whitney says that thing that we just played, which is like, well, I know it's going to be weird, but I'm going to give her a conjugal visit. And I don't know. That felt what? Yeah.
Do you know what that means? I had to look it up, to be fair to Whitney. I'd never heard that either.
But no one looks worse than Heather Gay, who has been Jen Shah's sort of chief defender this whole time. Mm-hmm. Not necessarily so much against the charges, but just like as a human, the way she behaves. And there was a clip circulating today from one of her Watch What Happens live appearances.
You need friends when you're in a situation like this.
Did you ask her point blank if she did the things she's charged of with?
I don't need to.
You don't need to. You know that she didn't.
It's irrelevant.
Is it?
I knew her business was unsavory when I was her friend, so why would I change now that it's public?
Well, I knew her job was unsavory when I met her, so why should it matter? What? The mental gymnastics of this woman.
Yeah, I think that she also is quick to follow up with, I didn't know it was illegal.
Yeah.
And it's like, well, what did you mean by unsavory then?
Yeah.
And so I think there's a bit of that, like in Utah, you probably have a lot of friends who do MLM shit, and you're like, that's not the most, ethical form of business, but it's legal, right?
It's not illegal,
but you wouldn't do it yourself.
Yeah, or it's kind of just like, I don't want to ask too many questions because I don't really want to know, because then I'll be culpable here, and I don't want that. It's a lot of that.
I saw a lot of other people, though, online, not just disappointed in, Heather's own dismissiveness or rationalization is probably the word for it. Mm-hmm. But all the other women at some point, besides Mary Cosby, who's gotten a lot of kudos today for calling Jen out for who she is early on, that even Meredith was very suspicious of Jen last season. And then even she has sort of completely dropped all, objections to hanging out with her or associating with her. And then in this last episode, she even says something like, "Oh, you don't bring up someone's legal problems and at a dinner."
Yeah,
everyone comes for Dana, who I'm totally defending as like my new fave. Mm-hmm. Not because she's like, obviously I think there's like part of that, like, oh, she's the only ethical one of the bunch at this point. But that's, they're like, there's this cultural pressure that they're applying to Dana. We don't talk about that here, or we don't talk.
Oh,
we don't
totally.
Talk, like she's going to pay the consequences of her actions. We don't need to rub it in her face, kind of thing. It's like,
well, they're all just scared of Jen. Like they see her unraveling, and they see how, like aggressive and even violent she could get. She threw someone's shoes. She dumped champagne. All of this happened in like the 3 days on this trip, and they just, I think that they all have this sense. Well, this is all before she pled guilty, but they've seen, this drip of news in her case, and they're like, I don't know, rather than, I think we all have this friend, maybe not to the Jen extent, but like I've had friends where it's just like, it's easier to just manage it day to day than like make it blow up and be a whole thing. Like I'll just write out these few days with Jen, make her happy, and then I don't have to see her for a couple weeks and I don't have to deal.
Yeah, well, now they won't have to deal with her for a couple of years.
6.5 years.
Yeah. And so the only other, obviously, housewife to receive this a sentence was Teresa Giudice on Real Housewives of New Jersey. And she got a very modest 11 months. And they paused filming of season 7 or whatever season they were on to wait for her to get out.
So she didn't even miss a season?
Because she was an integral part of their... Wow. So that will not be happening here.
Oh, God, no. Will SLC even be a franchise when Jen gets out of jail?
This is a great segue. We're coming to the end of this season, and the main storyline was not really Jen's sentencing at all, though that kind of played a key, and it wasn't even Heather's healing journey, as people were mocking. It ended up being Heather's eye, which is completely unresolved at this point. And the producers are getting raked, I think, like, understandably. There have been hilarious tweets Meghan McCain of The View.
Oh, yeah.
I've tweeted about how if they don't resolve this soon, she's
out.
She's out. I've seen a lot of like, I'm out if this turns out to be as dumb as I think it's going to be. I don't necessarily subscribe to that because I'm like, well, we're all talking about it. So that's kind of the point,
I
right?
feel invested as like a Salt Lake City native. If I didn't have that sort of like personal investment, I would have been out of this franchise probably a long time ago. But I love seeing the B-roll shots of like the places I know. So
this is the question that we should end on today, which is like, without Jen, do you think the franchise goes on? There's a big question about that.
That is a really good question. I mean, Jen is one of the most entertaining, pieces of this show. And there has been a lot, I think people have gotten bored this season. Lisa's a great character, but I really think they'd have to mix up this cast if Jen's going to be gone and not going to be part of the next season. And, what's the storyline going to be? It's hard to come back from. It's crazy to me that we had so much drama, legal drama, the black eye drama. Like, there's so many great, like, visuals and potential storylines, but we hardly got anything actually from Jen's legal troubles. We saw her meet with her therapist and be in New York for half a minute on the screen this whole season. And the black eye's a great visual, but it literally, they milked that for all it was worth, and we don't have anything to show for it. So it's a good question.
Potentially, now that her case is quote unquote resolved, like, there could be some interesting fallout from it. And that's what I think I would tune back in to see, like, do any of the women actually express regret for the ways in which they not just defended Jen, but covered for her during this whole ordeal when it was very clear that she had committed serious offenses.
I know they already taped the reunion, but I would really love to see a post-reunion where they, like, sit all of them down and play clips of them defending or, like, skirting the Jen issue from the last season or two.
You know what? I can't believe they didn't do that now.
Yeah.
That you're saying
I am surprised they filmed the reunion pre-Jen sentencing and didn't wait.
Yeah, I'm almost like, that was a huge mistake.
I'm annoyed they didn't.
Yeah, agreed. This episode of Disengaging is produced by me, Julia Ritchie, in Nashville, Tennessee.
And me, Nicole Nixon, in Sacramento, California.
Don't forget to find us and rate us on Spotify, Apple, Pocket Cast, wherever you get your podcasts. And we'll see you next week.
Bye!
Okay, well, I'm going to share you some of my favorite tweets, and I'm going to describe them for our listeners. So here's a Liza Minnelli on CNN Larry King live clip I will share with you. This one is to recap the last episode of RHOSLC. Producer, what benefit is there to you to protect the person who did this to you? And Liza Minnelli says,
Being alive!